over to you, and is the green light on the?
The green light is on.
Green light is on, that's a good thing. Then I'm
Yes.
just gonna hand it over to you and we'll just get going.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to start off quickly because I'm the engineer in the room. I'm the odd duck. So I'm Phil Martin. I'm an engineer with Bolton Mank. I'm the principal in charge on this proposal. I live locally, have worked with the city in the past with another consultant. Also, we did work on the corridor study for the Bushman, Nelson area. I guess we appreciate the opportunity to have this interview with this large crowd of people here. And my role in this really is to make sure this is getting done. We're putting the right resources there, checking with the group that's really doing the work. And then I also will provide background input on if there's engineering related, technical related stuff. But other than that, I'm going to turn this over to Robin, who is Moira today, and she'll explain why.
Yes. Thanks, Phil, and thank you again for having us. My name is Robin Kaufman, and I'm a senior community planner out of the St. Cloud office. I work very closely with Moira, as Phil mentioned. We tag team on a lot of projects, and so a lot of times it's really nice to have two of us working together so that if something comes up, she has one of us has a vacation, a sick day, something, there is somebody that can jump in and cover these kind of meetings or other activities. So a little bit of background about myself. I am out of the St. Cloud office. I had about 21 years of public sector work prior to that. And before that, I actually worked with Ehlers and Associates and established some of your TIF districts in the 90s. So those are now retired. But that was exciting. So I have worked in the area. I'm very familiar with the area. Literally been coming up here my entire life. My grandparents lived just outside of Pine River. My husband's family had a cabin in Nisswa, and so very familiar with the area. And also Moira and I work on a lot of other projects in the area. So Crow Wing County, we're both working on updating that with Dylan. We're working on updating the comprehensive plan for the city, or for Crow Wing County, as well as Becker County, and also working for MnDOT on the 371 Baxter to Nisswa project. So again, very familiar with the area and would look forward to working on this project. And I'm going to let Dylan, he's going to talk a little bit, or he's going to introduce himself and then talk about some of the zoning code slides. Oh, here, and I can do this.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, so I am Dylan Edwards. I am a planner with Bolton and Mink out of the St. Cloud office. Prior to my employment with Bolton and Mink, I worked for the city of Brainerd in their planning department with Mr. Kramvik, as you may know. But it's great because I love this area up here and working in this area and get the balance of working up here while also learning more about other parts of the state. But that's me in a nutshell. Moving on to our
Left click. They're not doing it. No, scroll.
there we
There
go.
we go.
Sorry.
It goes quickly.
Yes, it does. Moving on to understanding the challenges. Population and housing. This is an area with a projected 44% population increase by 2030, which is going to stretch the zoning code as it is to move and work with that kind of growth, especially in an area that is, almost 60-40 residential and seasonal split with land use. There's aesthetic and commercial growth, keeping, developing those form-based options, keeping with the north aesthetic that is very much present and visible as you're driving into the community, and sticking with that and working to make sure that's reflected in code moving forward, and preserving natural resources, which are a key component of this community, and then making sure that the community feels involved, because zoning codes are very technical documents. They're not the most average Joe friendly type of legal and regulatory items to get the public engaged on. But if you find ways and really incorporate the community values in those, that is something that we look forward to and we really excel in across the 60-some zoning codes that our company has done in the last 6 years. Very touching. So our code update approach is process-oriented, but with robust engagement. We, really seek to identify those opportunities in the first stage and then promote them transparently, getting community support so that when we are in that review process, everyone is engaged and really understands what is going on and what is happening in the process. But then we're also proposing to concurrently work on the subdivision code update to ensure efficiency and consistency in the process. Our goal is that your final deliverable will be modern, innovative, but more importantly and especially user-friendly, because if a developer cannot come in and use the code, or a resident can't figure out what they need and what standards they're supposed to be held to, that creates confusion and frustration that is frankly a disservice to constituents and citizens. But we also want to make sure it is visual and focuses on the character, which is something that we really look forward to doing and making happen. For engagement, I'll move it over to Moira.
Yeah,
Robin.
Moira. I'll go by that name for the day, so just for simplicity. On the side here, I just wanted to point out that these are several sketches that we've pulled from other codes that we've done. So, we find that sometimes, when people see things in words, they're like, well, what's a front setback and what's a back set, And so having some nice little graphics with a little key code really goes a long ways to helping people understand what those are. So that's what we envision including in the update. Oops, I gotta go backwards. It is very touchy. Okay, so as far as engagement, as Dylan and Phil had mentioned, zoning codes, subdivision codes are not like, if you say, hey, we're gonna have a public meeting, people are like, we're gonna do what? I'm gonna give up a summer evening to go to a public meeting. It's just not, like, a lot of people, it's really hard to engage people around it. Also, post-COVID, a lot of people we're finding just are not interested in going to public meetings. We've gotten used to virtual, used to virtual meetings, like lunch and learn style things, online engagement. And so what we're proposing is a pretty robust first communications and then engagement. You'll see that we did include at the Diaz, we've got a little fact sheet. So we already this is kind of an example of what a fact sheet might look like. And it does have a QR code. If you click that QR code, it goes to just a really simple story map based website that we propose. It's something that we can update and maintain really easily. It can have interactive, mapping and things that make it easy for people to take surveys or submit comments. And so we propose using something like this, some simple communications, some fact sheets. You can turn these into posters. You can do like table tents at bars or restaurants, just to give people, get word out to as many people as you can to engage them. The other challenge you have, as Dylan mentioned, 40% of your community is seasonal, so they may not be here. So when we get to the schedule, we're gonna show, that we're probably gonna be around, this winter when we'll have our draft for public hearing, and half your 40% of your community may not be here. So we'll wanna make sure that there's ways that we can engage with them, get the word out to them as well, and so that they can participate, not be excluded just because they are physically not here. So the first thing is really just communications, letting people know what's going on. We try to have a no surprises kind of approach to things, because if people are surprised and they don't feel like they've been communicated and kind of kept in the loop, that's when things blow up, as we know, when it goes to planning commission or public hearing. So we want to keep people engaged and give them ways to give feedback. But then we propose going to people at either pop-ups, focus groups. There may be, as we're doing the issue identification, we might find that there's some really, some big topics that we want to, that people are really passionate or really interested in, maybe we bring, you know, a handful of people in and just have like a work session and really kind of dive into it to find out what the issues are and then also generate some solutions. And again, keep those people kind of engaged in the process so that, again, they don't like surprise you at the public hearing. We would do an open house, you know, prior to adoption. You know, it's still a good idea to do. It's just not the only thing we would do. And then we can do things like online surveys and interactive mapping tools. Again, these are kind of some examples here on the page, on the slide here. And then as far as schedule goes, it kind of, you know, there's the 5 or 6 steps that you can see there, but it really breaks down into 3 like chunks, I guess. The first one is in phase 1, that would be the summer, where we would really spend some time reviewing your current zoning code, current subdivision code, ordinances, and then, you know, doing some engagement, working with the steering committee. We're proposing a steering committee that would include planning commission members, city council members, and staff. We find that those are individuals that are already really educated, they already know what a lot of the issues are, you're already engaged in the process, and a really easy way to kind of jumpstart and start going through some of these issues. So first phase, again, identify issues. Then for the majority of kind of the fall and winter timeframe, we would be just diving in and starting to write chapters, or not write chapters, but write sections. And there would be a review process. So we would maybe write a section, you know, bring it back to the steering committee, maybe bring it back to the planning commission at a certain point, get some feedback and draft again. So we're not like gonna just write everything and then give it to you in February or March and say, what do you think? Like, we wanna make sure that we're moving in the right direction before we get, you know, super long ways into the process. So that would be, again, most of the fall and winter time, and then come, you know, around the turn of the year, we would propose, you know, starting to go out with some public feedback, maybe letting people know what's going on, let them know that there's gonna be a public input process, and then March, April, we should hopefully be in the process, in the approval process. So you notice that is about a 10-month process, and we've been working on several other comp plans and zoning codes, actually, where we're doing both concurrently. And we're finding that, you know, 10, 11 months is about realistic. You don't want it to take too long, because if it goes too long, you lose interest, you kind of lose momentum. You know, if you start doing data gathering now and, you know, you're not approving it until next winter, next fall, your data's a 1.5 years old already. So we figure, and I'm sure the other thing is that you're probably interested, some developers may be interested in getting into the construction season next year. So we'd hope that we'd be able to have the zoning code and subdivision ordinances done by this time next year. So people could do some submissions and start some projects next year. So that's high level, I guess, process. And I guess we wanted to leave the rest of the time for questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll hand it over to Roger and Teddy first and let you ask. I know probably Pete and I probably have some questions too, but we'll let you ask any questions that you might have first.
Well, you evidently have worked with cities like the size of Breezy.
Yes.
I mean, we're not Minneapolis, we're not Roseville, we're not, you know, it's a resort. Mm-hmm. So when you're saying zoning codes, and maybe this is something David will we be changing lot sizes? Is that what zoning codes mean, or?
So potentially, I think that's part of this whole process is having that discussion of, you know,
Zoning districts too.
Do we want to see smaller lots? Do we want to see bigger lots? How does, you know, again, the one we have is quite old, and, you know, different changes have happened and development patterns have happened, and, you know, we'll talk about, you know,
all right,
things like that.
If Dylan and I are actually working on zoning code update, a comp plan and zoning code update for the city of St. Augusta, right, just outside of St. Cloud. Mm-hmm. So it's similar, you know, a little over 2,000. population, but they've just kind of morphed. They just keep amending their zoning code, and so it was over 300 some pages by the time you got all the amendments and stuff. And it starts to get really convoluted and really long and really complex. They had like 16 zoning code zoning districts, and some of the things we're looking at is, Dylan was talking
Many
about.
of which they no longer used, they were just there because they had not done an update in 20 years.
Yeah, so that's like going through and, like what's not being used anymore, some of them have morphed, sometimes the districts have morphed and they're almost the exact same thing, and so really going through it and cleaning it up and seeing maybe where things are outdated, redundant.
Did you say St. Joe or St. Augusta?
St. Augusta,
Okay, so it's kind of similar population, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
no lakes, well, I think they have one lake.
They
so-
have
And a little river.
Most of the lake is developed around here. It's in Breezy anyhow. It's mostly the undeveloped lots to the west of the city hall, right? That would
Yeah,
affect-
you have that, but what you also end up having too is, your code's not just about the new development, undeveloped, but it's also about redevelopment. And how do we
Right.
address, how many variances do we get on lake lots? And looking at what is it that's constantly is it something that, if it's a shoreland setback thing, well, that's maybe.
That's a
I don't know if
county
that might
thing,
be a
isn't
DNR issue, but there are other issues that maybe we can,
Right.
that our zoning code could, an updated zoning code could help alleviate or address.
Right.
And that's a great point. That is one of the things that because ordinances are so outdated in a lot of cases, you're seeing a lot of variances as new things, like accessory dwelling units or, trying to think of another example, but they keep kind of, you keep bringing them up and then you get to have a public hearing and people can
Yeah.
come and.
Or new uses that were not short-term rentals are probably the biggest example of those. Is 20 years ago, that was not something that any one of us had on the horizon, but now it is something that tends to eat up a lot of municipalities' time, especially tourism locations. But if you don't have part of that in your code or, a use, then it's going to the public process every time you go through though, and you could use something like this process to find a more streamlined way to handle them.
Okay, you have any questions?
I do not. I apologize for being late.
So I guess then I guess Peter and I'll start. I do have a few. Some of them, part of the process, I was gonna ask, do you feel like 10 months is aggressive? Obviously, I think the answer there is no. You're good with that? I will say with the idea of, adopting in that April, do you have any concern, I think one thing we've discussed is, trying to time it right where, you're not around the building season. You don't necessarily want to implement a new code right in the middle of a building season. We're like, well, if you got your permit in May, it's this code, but if you got your permit in July, it's this code. Kind of balancing that out. So I would say maybe it's more of a comment, something we'd want to be cognizant of as we're going through this process of, and maybe as we're going through, it's one of those things like, hey, if we need to push it a little bit the way it's going, that's going to be okay. So that's something I think we want to be cognizant of.
Can I make it?
Yeah.
There has been a few cases where we have worked on projects where, the zoning code is in the process of being updated. And a lot of times, because the developers realize that whatever the changes may be favorable to them, a lot of times they'll just hold off instead of trying to, just sneak in underneath the previous one. So that's a lot of time, we have seen that happen where, they just decide to hold off and, if it's something that right now would require a conditional use or something like that, and under the new code, it wouldn't, like, it's in their best interest to do that, but then, obviously, they'd hopefully be engaged in the process too, so it's not like, surprise.
Another question I had is, how often, kind of trying to look at your proposal, try to weed it out, but how often do you anticipate actually being here in person in Breezy Point throughout this process?
I guess it's a matter of how interested in, having in-person meetings versus, virtual meetings. So I think we had at least a few steering committee meetings that we thought would be in person, and of course, any, in-person, focus groups, I think, are definitely best done in person. And of course, public hearings and any pop-ups or things like that. So I think we are envisioning some of them, like some of the, maybe the steering committee meetings and, staff meetings could be virtual, but again, that could be up to, maybe up for discussion or.
More
or not.
client discretion.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other, like, we have found too that with virtual meetings, sometimes more people are able to participate, not knowing exactly with the planning commission and the city council makeup or who might be on the steering committee if they have work commitments, but they want to like sneak in a meeting during the day or something, so.
The last one I've got is, as I know you're probably very well aware, is the, I don't know if I want to word the word, it's implementation, adoption of cannabis is going to be going into effect in the next couple months here. So have you, in the cities you've been working with, have you, as part of the zoning code, obviously zoning is an element of those regulations going into effect and what the cities are deciding to do. So have you been involved, and obviously that's going to end up being, as we go through this process, is going to end up being a discussion, I think, with the planning commission, with the city council. So what kind of experience have you been having with the other communities you work with in having around the cannabis discussion?
I'll mention two of the cities that I've had that were working the zoning code. One of them had actually started working with with their attorney. So their attorney was the one that helped get them the language, and they adopted it before we actually did more of the zoning code. We added it. I guess we added it as we added the definitions and things like that and incorporated it in, but they had worked with most of the communications or the drafting already. One of our other communities, St. Augusta, has just decided we're just gonna, whatever happens, happens, and so that's the two. I don't know if you've been running into others or.
I know internally a lot of us in planning who do daily planning services shop talk amongst ourselves and handle it in different ways throughout different communities and around the state. And we have a pretty robust research trove that we keep on hand in case it does come up for a process like this or in a daily planning situation.
Excellent. Pete, you got anything?
With the steering committee, what do you successfully see for, the makeup of that body?
I've kind of seen the range of types of steering committees. I've seen where it's made up of property owners, residents, business owners. My experience is that it's really hard to, you can literally spend 3 months just trying to find people, sending them invitations, getting them to commit, scheduling the first meeting, that sort of thing, and then, it's not a super high priority, like if they're available, maybe they'll make it, sort of thing. So, that's one option. We've done another option where it's been a city, like the city council representative, a planning commission rep, an HRA or EDA rep, and then staff that meets like once a month and provides direction and feedback, and that seems to work well. As long as you have kind of buy-in from the rest of the planning commission, city council, I think that works really well. It's probably the easiest to schedule and kind of keep process moving. The one that we've been using the most and that a lot of our clients have been taking is actually doing joint planning commission and city council meetings, and then we actually post them. There's often a quorum. We actually post them as public meetings, and so people, if they want to come, it's kind of another way of engaging. So those people that really want to be engaged can come and, listen to the conversation. We might have comment cards out so that they can still provide comments, but that's actually one of the ones that we've had the most success. The ones, St. Augusta and Rockville, right next to each other, we've been using that model, and we've had 100% participation in the last 3 meetings for each of them. So It's a, it's a time commitment, but it
Right.
also helps, like, again, it's the no surprises thing by the time, hopefully, like, we're halfway
Yeah.
through the process. But hopefully, by the time we get to the public hearing, everyone should hopefully be on board, or at least we know what the issues are gonna be, so.
Sure, and which would segue into another question on that, which, like, on the steering committee, would you envision people like from other LGU areas too, like somebody from the county, because our city has like a wetland are managed through the county, or they have the WACA jurisdiction, or would we have somebody present from like, the DNR just dealing with our shoreland areas type of?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something you could do. Another option is just keeping them informed. One of the, it could be like a steering committee. There's one community that, Becker County actually, that we held a steering committee with all the natural resources. So that's where we had the watershed districts, the soil and water, the DNR, I can't think of who else was at that.
The focus group, we had the watersheds, multiple lake associations, DNR was and then we also had a agency update with all of the townships as well,
Yes.
so it was.
Okay.
So you have no problem getting somebody from Crow Wing County to come to these meetings?
That would, I think having
I don't think it would be an issue. I was just gonna say from my experience, when we worked on the Bushman, Wild Darkest Nelson corridor, we actually had representatives from the townships, from Pequot Lakes, Breezy Point, we had the county involved. And actually we had them here, and then we also had a remote option. Because it was just like you said, we'd pick a time and 5 out of 6 people could make it. And one couldn't, but they could always remote in. And, we could still show stuff up on the screen, they could participate remotely. You said better buy-in that way, because people could even be driving to their next meeting and hear the discussion and stay in tune, so.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
costs, I see your total not to exceed 124,871.
That's in the budget.
That's the budget. So
That's within budget.
does it ever come out under? And is there a to exceed?
I think their proposal is not to exceed.
Oh, okay, yeah, it does say that, yep.
If you guys are really good and you just pull everything together and there's no squabbling and everything, I think there's a chance we could get under.
So in other words, probably not.
Not Cross Lake, not in this one.
All right,
I mean, it's always better to plan for the worst case scenario than to plan for the best and then exceed.
Yes.
There you go.
and as a city, we have to take the lowest,
Nope,
no?
not
Okay.
for this.
Okay,
Nope. You get to pick.
okay.
Well, and there could be things, there may be, this was just a proposal, but should we be selected, we would be able to go through and, maybe you say, well, maybe we want 2 pop-ups, or maybe we don't want the interactive mapping, but we want another survey, or
We have a
maybe,
pretty robust engagement in here,
Yeah.
and it comes with a cost, but there's value in, that's what you want out of this, is to
Right.
engage and to get the participation, so.
yeah. The not getting, or getting to the end and not having, that's where I see a lot of schedules or budgets going over, is if it gets, a 6-month drawn-out process, and so it is robust, but it actually does help. It helps in the back end, when you're not doing a continuation and a continuation and a continuation, and then a moratorium, because you have to do another continuation, and
Time is money.
Yep.
it's like we've been there, right?
Got like 2 more minutes. Pete, you got anything else?
I think that gets it.
Gentlemen, you have anything else? No. Awesome. Well, I don't have anything else myself, so I just want to say thank you. Thanks for coming, and also we've got 3 more after you to give their pitches, and then you'll hear from us. My guess is we'll probably have another time for the commission to convene and discuss, and then they'll make a recommendation, which will then go to the city council at their June 3rd council meeting.
Okay.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you.
And in the meantime, let us know. I think Moira's contact, she was on She regrets not being able to be here, but her contact is here, so if there are any follow-up questions or you need more information, we'd be happy to help out.
Okay.
So we look forward to
you.
working with you.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
Okay. Does it hear it's pretty sensitive, is that right?
If you,
All right. Well, I'm Jeff Miller. I'm with HKGI. We're based in Minneapolis, and this is Jason Zimmerman. Let's see. We're going to get to the right screen. Well, maybe we'll just finish with our introduction. So I've been with HKGI since 2005. I'm a planner, an associate there, and have worked with lots of communities all over Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, a little bit in North Dakota, a little bit in Michigan, and go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so I am new to HKGI. I've just joined there this year, but I've worked with them a number of times over the last years. I just got done working for 10 years for the city of Golden Valley, so a Minneapolis suburb. I was the planning manager there. So I'm familiar with HKGI's work, and I'm doing a number of zoning code updates for them now, and also did a number of zoning code updates for the city when I was working there on our own.
So we'll try to go through these things quickly because we know you saw our proposal, but our firm's about 25 people. We have planners like ourselves, landscape architects, urban designers. So we're a small firm. As planners, there's probably about 8 of us, and we do everything from zoning, subdivision codes, planning services, meaning that we contract with cities. We do the day-to-day planning for those cities. You may have that situation here, I'm not sure, but lots of comprehensive plans, area plans, whether they're downtown plans or neighborhood plans or redevelopment plans, parks and trail plans, and then streetscape design. Our team would be 5 people. I'd be the project manager. Jason's the lead planner. Rita Trapp is also a planner, would be the principal in charge. Rita and I have been the key people for doing all of our zoning work over the past 10 years. I would say until very recently, Rita and I have been managed all of those projects. So I'd be really integral to the project, but Rita would be there as a resource because we've worked in tandem for many projects. As you can see, we have 3 members who have 20 plus years of experience. That'd be Rita, myself, and Jason. And then we have Kendra Elner, who's newer to our firm, came from the city of River Falls most recently in Wisconsin. And then Mia, also relatively new, who came here from an island off the coast of Maine. And it was a small town, so it probably relates to the size of Breezy Point, maybe beautiful. Every time she talks about it, it's a beautiful community. So our team, we're really familiar with all of the planning types of projects that are done in cities. So we mentioned the codes, the plans. We've also been doing more housing studies in the last, I'd say, 3-4 years. That's a growing area for us, and we've been combining those with code updates. So we recently did a county housing study for Winona County, and a big portion of that project was to audit their zoning code to identify barriers to housing development as part of the housing study. So, and now we're just starting a housing study, similar element that relates to zoning and how where the barriers are in zoning for housing in Itasca County. And we're just starting that project. And then we have a lot of experience with lake, river-related development planning. We do planning services for cities like Lindstrom, if you know that city, lots of lakes, shoreland, and then Mound, Minnesota, where they're the planners for those cities. So we're really familiar with that. And then all of us have been planners in cities. So we've actually used zoning codes. So we know what's important to make them work well. And then just a quick map showing all the zoning code experience that we have. Of course, we have a lot in the metro area, but also Grand Marais, which we'll talk about a little bit, and then into Wisconsin, Onalaska, and then Greenville, Wisconsin, way east. And with that, I'll let Jason talk about the project.
All right, so I'm just going to walk through kind of a typical way we handle a zoning code update. We've been doing more and more of these, and we kind of have figured out a pretty systematic way to tackle it. Not that every community doesn't have its kind of individual nuances, but there's a good system for going through and starting the process. You can see the 5 steps here, and I'll walk through each of those really briefly. So the first thing is really always coming in and kind of, understanding the context, defining the project with staff and planning commission and city council. One of the first things, if we were lucky enough to work with you, would come in and kind of finalize that schedule and our community engagement strategy. So get that laid out up front. Is the timing right? Is the number of meetings correct? And once we have that locked down, we really want to meet with the staff to understand, since they're the ones that are dealing with the code regularly and the planning commission, what are the things that are causing you problems? What are the things that are working well and you really think shouldn't be changed? What's the motivation for updating the code? Is it just that it's not modern, it's outdated in the language, or are there specific problems that you really want this new code to solve? So we want to understand all of that. Another thing that we like to do is do a little reconnaissance tour with the staff of the city. We can drive around the community ourselves and see it, but people who are here on the ground are going to have a better way to kind of explain what we're seeing, what the issues are, point out the types of character that they want to be preserving, the things that maybe have gotten built that they don't like. So we want to understand that. And then again, looking at all of your documents through a comprehensive plan, which I know is fairly new, understanding that, any other studies or documents to really give us that background and help us inform as we go forward. So that's really the background starting point. And then we get into kind of the zoning nerd stuff where we dig into your code. They call it the code diagnosis. We have done this for a number of different communities, and they're all different, but they all have the same basic elements. And we want to get in, look at your use tables, look at your lot dimensions, what are the different districts, what are the standards, and we start organizing them into tables. It helps us understand and pull them apart. You've probably always seen them in the text form where they're all laid out. When we can pull them apart and reorganize them, we start to look at patterns. We do mapping of your current zoning districts. Everyone's seen the zoning map where all the zoning districts are together. We like to look at just the residential, just the commercial, just the public spaces, and look for patterns. We compare everything we're seeing with what's in your comprehensive plan, the goals around future land use and housing, to make sure that what we're seeing or what your city says it wants is what the zoning code is actually producing or should be producing. And then we start to evaluate that overall structure and organization, kind of how we've seen good codes laid out in terms of what comes first, what comes second, and how that works. And then we get into the really challenging but fun part of actually writing the draft code. We like to do it in kind of a system we're calling 3 modules, where we dive into kind of the basic part that most people use right away. The zoning districts, the uses in those districts, and then all of your dimensional and building standards having to do with the uses in those districts. So we take that, we work with it, For each of these 3 modules, we propose having a work session, usually with the Planning Commission. The City Council can be involved if they want. But again, kind of doing these in chunks so it's manageable. So we start with our base districts and those factors. We talk that through. Then we come back and look at general performance standards around parking, around outdoor lighting, around screening. Use-specific standards, so whether it's multifamily or commercial, we dig into what those uses are, any specific standards that go with those, and also your definition section. So we do that, we work with you and kind of review that, and then we come back at the end and kind of do all the administrative. How do you process a rezoning? How do you process a conditional use permit? What are the general provisions under which the Planning Commission operates? So we go through all of those, we have our work sessions, and by the end, hopefully we have a pretty robust draft of that zoning code that we can then work with. One thing I know you've asked for is to kind of, once we get a fairly complete draft of the zoning code, to then go back to your comprehensive plan and see what might need to be adjusted or updated, because if we've changed some districts or changed some elements of your zoning, we want to make sure that that's still consistent with the comp plan. So we'd go back and look at the goals and strategies, see if there's anything that needs to be carried over, especially those land use, housing, and community character chapters. Those are the ones that are probably most likely to be influenced by an updated zoning code. And then at the end of that, we'd have both the draft zoning code, the draft comp plan update, and we do our engagement to kind of have the broader community review those, because ultimately we're getting to that final preparation, bringing forth the code, any new zoning maps, the comp plan updates to the Planning Commission for the public hearing, for the City Council for consideration, and then delivering final products to you, various formats of digital, so that you can have those for your website and other uses. And then just quickly, the timeline that we are projecting for this, we found that most of our zoning updates, it always varies, but kind of in that 14 to 16 to 18 month range, depending on how complicated they are. We think this is probably a 15 to 16 month timeline, proposing to start as soon as you're ready, hopefully in June. And you can see kind of those 5 phases across the top, roughly 2 months to kind of get all the background information, 2 months for us to really kind of dig in and diagnose the code and kind of pull it apart. And then a good chunk of time, throughout the fall, winter, and into the spring of doing those 3 modules, trying to start putting it all back together, reserving some time about this time next year to do your comprehensive plan update, and then finishing kind of late summer next year with those public hearings, and then hopefully adoption. I'll turn it back to Jeff.
And just to add on to the schedule, we are open to making that work for you. One of the things that is extending it a little bit is because that updating the comprehensive plan is not a typical component in the projects we've done. It should be done, but usually when we get hired, that's not laid out that we would actually update the comp plan as well. So why do we think we're the best fit? I guess I have on the slide a good fit for this project. So we really keyed in on, one sentence in the RFP was the final project. Product must be an innovative, intuitive, highly illustrative, and user-friendly code that implements the vision of the plan. So we wanted to really take that to heart. So we're just going to go through a few things that hopefully show that we're a good fit to reach that goal. So, we're an experienced team of code analysts and writers. I'll show you that in a second on a slide. We think our code audit approach is really good, and it's something that we've really perfected over time. We've really worked with housing types a lot, so we have a lot of knowledge there. The community character priority that you have, we've done a lot of design standards and design guidelines towards that. We are really good at modernizing and making the codes user-friendly, such as those tables, and then our community engagement. So experienced team, we've done a broad range of code updates all the way from full code rewrites. I'd say maybe half of the ones that we've done have been that. Sometimes we get hired to do an audit or a code update and it's focused on certain things. So for instance, in Grand Marais, they hired us to first do a study to identify development barriers in their zoning code to housing. And that led to updating their code, but it was just the residential districts, not the rest of the code at all. And we've done that with other things where we're hired to just update certain key elements of a code. And then our planning services work lends us to do code updates all the time. So we've been working with, for instance, the city of Mound in the Western Twin Cities area for 20 years or so. So we are consistently updating their code with well, just updating their code. So that, we've been doing that in many cities where we are the planners. We've worked with a wide variety of communities, small to large. As I mentioned, Grand Marais, which I think of as small, but it's maybe, it might be bigger than Breezy Point in the summer, at least. Because I think they, maybe, I don't know your population in the summer, it's probably very different also, but all the way up to some of the metro cities that we have in our proposal. And then we've done rural, small town, and urban communities, so we feel like we've learned a lot from all those, and we can navigate to what fits best for Breezy Point. And then we feel like we're really still learning and innovating our code writing, so I think it really did start with Grand Marais about, I don't know, 6-8 years ago, working with them really closely, and from there we've just done lots of code updates over the last 6 to 8 years. So, and you can see the list of all those cities that we have done code updates for. And then our code audit expertise, we have experience with doing audits as part of the code update like you're asking for, but more recently we've been getting hired to just do code audits for cities. So for example, Chaska, St. Louis Park, Winona County, some others, where we haven't been hired initially to do the code update. They just want us to come in and audit the code and tell us what are the things that the community should fix or wants to fix, and then from there figure out what's the phasing of actually doing the updating. So we've done both the audits internally to the project or ahead of the project. We feel really good about our analysis using tables and mapping, which Jason described, and that can work out really well for the code in Rosemount, Minnesota. We recently, well, they're gonna adopt their code, I think, on June 3rd. But they went from 96 pages of zoning districts text to, I think we got it down to about 6 pages plus 2 tables. So they were really happy about that. Much easier to use that code in that situation. We focus the most on the most used sections of the code first, which Jason described. So we always start with the zoning districts and really get those set up first, that they're working for the community before we update anything else in the code. And then understanding how each community uses zoning currently versus aspirations. So we really try to tailor our projects to how you use your zoning code, not how we think communities use it, because everybody uses it differently. One example would be, sometimes we work with cities that use a planned unit development for everything. So if they want us to update their code, we can talk about lots of things in the code, but the most important thing is to figure out what do they do with their planned unit development, because that's what they're relying on for most of their development. Housing types knowledge, this has been really successful for us, where we start with getting community input. If this is important enough for Breezy Point, which it seems like it might be based on your comprehensive plan, but talk about things like missing middle housing, other housing options that can fit into the community or that people want in the community. And then we start with doing a survey and asking people which ones they like, which ones they think fit in the community, and then what are their concerns if they do come to, if they are allowed in the community clearly in the code, which they usually are not allowed clearly in the code. And then that can help us to identify what standards you need if twin homes are going to be next to single family homes or things like that. Whoops, wrong way. Oh, there we go. There we go. Community character. We know this is important to you. We have, we haven't read the comp plan, but we have looked at your comp plan a little bit, so we know how that's important. One thing that we would bring to it is we've done a lot of design, both design standards in the code and then design guidelines outside the code, which are not required if they're outside the code, but they're established so that the city can give those guidelines to developers to say, this is what we want or would like in the community. And then the developers can use that as a guide. So we do both, and then we've really tried to get really good graphics that show what these things are, whether it's articulation of the front of the building or, you know, a certain percentage of windows and doors or exterior building materials. And, you know, we have done, we're not sure if this is what Breezy Point is looking for, but we have done form-based zoning districts or overlay districts for certain parts of cities, basically, we haven't really done full form-based codes at all. A lot of cities are looking for form-based elements to their code. So we call those hybrid codes, and they balance form and use standards. Usually the uses get more flexible, and there's just more clearness or predictability for what kind of form is acceptable. And then modernized, streamlined, user-friendly codes. We try to bring in graphics. This is just a list of the types of things that codes could benefit from. Not every one of them in every city, but these are typical updates that go into codes when when a city does a rewrite of their code. And that the example on the left side is Grand Marais, trying to show people, in their case, they wanted new housing in the existing city. They didn't want to extend sewer and water if they didn't have to. So we're trying to show new housing types and what the scale of them would be if they were in existing neighborhoods, so people could understand that. Effective community engagement, we have a full spectrum of things that we can bring to the project, really balancing how well in-person events work in your community versus virtual. And as with everybody with the pandemic, we've upped our game on that because we had to do it virtual. So we have a lot of different applications that really are engaging for people to give input virtually on your website or through our website, to get more input so that they have to be at City Hall at a certain time on a certain day. But we do have budget in our project to be up here, to be in person, for things that would be effective in-person meetings. So we have a full list there. I think the last thing is just, these are some of the, I'd say the better examples of cities where we've updated codes that are relevant to Breezy Point. And I know some of them, Winona's a much bigger city than Breezy Point, but we did do a downtown district for them, and we did standards that were about community character for downtown Winona, which is a historic district. Grand Marais, we understand the North Woods environment. We're also working in Hermantown on their comprehensive plan, not their code yet. It does include a code audit as part of our work, but that's all about the character and lot sizes and what's rural and what's suburban and all that. So we're very comfortable with talking about that kind of stuff in the code. So I appreciate your time. I think that's what we have as far as a presentation.
So let's go hand over to you two gentlemen first.
A quick question, and maybe I should know this. A code audit, when you do a code audit, what does that involve?
So, yeah, so what we do is we'll go through, we'll look at the structure of the code. So I think your code has about 6 sections, say. There's a zoning district section, there's a zoning administration section. We'll go through that and look at how it's organized, and there's always one of those sections that is a catch-all. It's all this stuff is in there that's not really related to each other. And we know what works best to make it easier for people to use the code. So we'll evaluate or audit the structure of the code. We'll do the mapping of the zoning districts, residential, separately from commercial, and look at that and figure out, are all your districts being used or not? We'll make tables of all the uses across all the districts, and then all the standards across all the districts, and look at that and figure out if you need all your districts or if you're missing districts. So it really sets up the priorities for what the updates to the code should be. It also includes talking to stakeholders, getting input from the public if you think that would be helpful. Sometimes that's hard because regular people don't know what to say about a zoning code.
Right.
But, for instance, if fences have been a big topic, if we get that input from people, then we prioritize and identify what things we're going to focus on.
Lindstrom's kind of a community similar to this, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as that I can see, Maplewood sure isn't, St. Louis Park isn't, Roseville, Rosemont.
They might not be, I've said this before, Roger, they might not be similar to us in size or, they're urban versus rural, but at the same time, a zoning code is a zoning code. Like there's not, you know, the structure of how you approach a zoning code, it's the same. You're looking at setbacks, we're talking lot sizes. So yeah, what Woodbury does might be different than what Breezy Point does.
Right.
But the approach is very much the same.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
we may have more wetlands and et cetera and so forth, yeah.
But I will say from Grand Marais is a pretty good, we've used them for other purposes as a comparison city. You know, it's a, you know, city that's a smaller population, but that balloons in the summer because of tourism, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
we've used them before as a good comparison for other things as well.
Yeah, and, you know, comparable to you, because it sounds like you have a lot of short-term rental properties and seasonal homes. One of the first things we did there, because they were so focused on having housing, they need housing, they have a crisis. I'm not sure if you see it as a crisis in Breezy Point, but up there it was just even mapping what is the housing that they have. And so we had to map the tax classifications from the county, which are a list of like 20 things, and the map doesn't make sense to anybody, you can't even understand it. And so we took all those classifications to create a map that said, this is the type of housing you have now, where it's being rented, where it's owner occupied, where it's short-term rental, to figure out where they had opportunities for infill development. So, and then we really got into lot size there. Again, I don't know if that's where you're going with this, but their lot size went from, in at least one district, went from 10,000 square feet minimum to 5,000. But that's what they were looking for. Hermantown, we're starting off with, they want more housing options. Their minimum lot size is half an acre in their zoning. And so in the comp plan, we're talking about, you know, what developers need to actually do development up there. And so they're probably going to reduce it to a minimum of a quarter acre in most of the city. And then they're going to set up new land uses in districts for multifamily as well. Today, I don't think they have any multifamily districts.
Hermantown's also was actually just at a conference with, and I know the Hermantown administrator quite well, very similar to Breezy in that only like a third or a half at maximum of their city actually has municipal sewer, where the other half is well and septic, just like us. So from that perspective, they're having to keep the same things in mind too, of, well, this area's got sewer, so maybe the lots can go this way. These areas do not, so then we've got to take that into account too.
Yeah, so a key question for them was, they have a pipe identified going out to the west third of the city, and they want to know, do they need to build that? When do they need to build it? And we've just done tons of mapping to identify where there's undeveloped land, looked at wetlands a lot, because they have tons of wetlands up there. And so what's really developable? And then we even looked at lot sizes and did a map of different lot sizes where if they had access to a road and sewer in the sewered area, how much land would subdivide if they had access to it? And it's a lot. And so as part of the comp plan, we've determined they don't need to build that pipe. They have the land, they just have to figure out, you know, what type of housing and what density and where is that appropriate, because they don't want it everywhere. They want, you know, they want to retain the rural character in a lot of the city, so.
Would you put a group together for these meetings? And what would they?
Today's your mic on.
What was that? You wanted me to turn my mic on?
We would. We've definitely worked with steering committees quite often on projects. We don't do it as often on zoning code updates, to be honest.
Okay.
I think mostly because it's such a technical thing that you need people that are committed to being there at those meetings. And steering committees can be. I mean, we've worked with great steering committees, large steering committees, like for downtown projects, especially, I would say. For zoning codes, sometimes it's really hard to get the public interested.
Right.
And a committed steering committee. The planning commission is typically who we work with, and they're a great group usually.
I would say, though, there are opportunities to have kind of targeted focus group conversations with people in certain industries or certain types of users who can identify the issues they have. So whether it's developers and kind of the challenges they find working with your code, or here might be the resort owners and kind of what are the challenges. They don't need to know everything about the whole zoning code, but for a
Right.
specific topic, you can pick their brains about what their challenges are and then address those as part of your kind of working groups.
Pull them in as needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got two quick questions for you gentlemen. You know, again, you mentioned it a little bit before, but what are your thoughts on, you know, the being here in person versus virtual? Do you have a preference? You know, how often do you actually anticipate being up here? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I put the budget together. So we definitely have in the budget to be here for all planning commission, joint meetings, public meetings. We could be up here for staff meetings, but especially with code projects, which can get pretty detailed and you want them more frequently, we're working with cities next door, literally next, St. Louis Park, literally next door to us, and we do virtual meetings because it's easier for them. So, we're flexible. We have in the budget to be up here, I think 8 to 10 times probably. And that could be more possibly, but I think the virtual meetings with staff work really well.
The second one I'm kind of question I'm asking for everybody because of obviously the impending implementation of cannabis regulations. What have you been seeing cities, you know, maybe have you worked with any cities as helping them implement that? Because obviously zoning is a big piece of that.
Yeah, so I know I'm just starting to have some conversations, the city that I work with, on our next planning commission agenda. We're diving into the topic, working with their city attorney to kind of, what are the ground rules that we know we're going to be working with, and different cities are going to have very different approaches. Some are really going to embrace it and go with it. Others are going to be more reluctant. And there's a whole variety of tools you can use to kind of regulate and control. So we're starting to have those conversations. I'm actually part of a kind of side working group of planners down in the Twin Cities, and we're all going to talk about how each of our cities is approaching it and kind of share notes. I just talked to someone in Minneapolis today about kind of what they are doing. They're a little bit ahead of everyone else because they're Minneapolis. But I think everyone is trying to figure it out, and so we're in constant conversation. Your zoning code, hopefully we'll be able to anticipate that, and we'll know more what the legislature has done by the time we get into the meat and bones of the zoning code, so we can build that in so that by the time it goes into effect next year, you're prepared.
Just a couple quick questions here. I think you guys pretty much hit on all the ones that I got, except first one, in your view, is the budget for the proposed size of the project and scope of the project realistic? And the next one I'd have is, in your opinion, what is the optimum time frame to accomplish this project?
Yeah. So the budget we have in there, the 120,000 you're asking about? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've done full rewrites, and that's right in that range of what the full rewrites have been. We have been, obviously there are cities that have had smaller budgets, and they're very challenging. And we just have to say we can't do everything. I think the 120,000 is a good number for a full rewrite, and we can touch all of the code.
And that includes that also includes the comprehensive plan part.
And the comprehensive plan, yeah, yep. And then as far as the timeline, we put in that, as Jason said, we put in the 14 to 60 months, I think. If there's a goal to get it done quicker, we could move towards that. The reason we went a little bit longer was because of that comprehensive plan update. But if there is a deadline that you're targeting, we're open to working with you on that timeline. And that's the first step in the project when we get hired, is to say, we want the schedule to end in, I think we have September or something, in July. Mm-hmm. We'll work with you to revise that schedule if needed.
Okay. That sounds good. If I have just one chance for one more question at all, I think we got a little bit of.
Maybe another minute.
Working with the city, we administer and implement building code. No issues with that or any type of considerations. I don't know if the city of Grand Marais does that or not. We often hear, people say, hey, possibly the city's difficult to work with because we implement building code, whereas in some other place, maybe like the Wild West, just straight up zoning code. So,
Yeah, I mean, all the cities that I have, the one I just came from and worked with the building official within the city, were constant conversation. The one that I'm currently providing the planning services for, they contract out for their building permits. So we've worked in both worlds, and I think, doing a zoning code that can work either way is not a problem for us.
perfect.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we do with cities, which you're not asking for, but is we've done unified development codes. And in that case, subdivision oftentimes comes into the same code. Building code could come in there as well. Sometimes environmental things that are outside the zoning code come in. You weren't asking for that, so.
Nope.
But we have worked with that concept of all development things being in the same code at some point to make it easier for everybody to work with, and everything works together then.
Exactly. No, that answers that question very well. Thank you.
Well, I think that's
Yeah.
the time we have, gentlemen, so thank you for coming up and spending the time. Planning Commission will be meeting again to recap and make a recommendation. That'll go before the City Council on June 3rd and making a formal selection at that point.
Great. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for your
gentlemen.
time.
I'm gonna use that.
I'll still pay you for this, Roger. Don't worry. I'll still pay. And our folks from Landform don't seem to be here, but WSB's here early. We're here early, and so we're gonna let them just jump right in.
All right.
So Paul, Kim, I'll turn it over to you two.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, David. So thank you for allowing us to present to you all tonight. We are WSB, and we're here to give you guys a quick brief overview of our proposal that was per the RFP that David solicited here at, I think it was in a month ago or so. Oh,
No,
did I skip one?
yeah.
Oh, there we go.
It's
I'm
fast.
sorry, yeah. Okay, so who we are, who is WSB? WSB, we're a full-service design and planning consulting firm. We specialize in engineering, community planning, environmental, and construction services. We've had some rapid growth here in the past 6 months with some acquisitions down in the southern United States, where we've acquired a couple of additional engineering firms and really expanded not only our staff, but our service offerings. You can see in our presentation a listing of the service areas that our company encompasses. We like to say that we have a very deep bench of technical staff that Kim and myself really lean on when we're going through these zoning ordinance rewrites. As you guys are well aware, zoning codes can cover a multitude of different areas, being that, anywhere from electric vehicle charging or cannabis regulations. And we like to think that our deep bench has all the technical expertise in-house to be able to write a zoning ordinance and rewrite a zoning ordinance to fit the community, the character of the community, and really make a plan that works for you all and is easily to implement by staff, is visually appealing. One of our big groups is our graphic design group, so they really take a lot of pride and effort into designing plans that are very visually appealing and are easily implementable and readable by your staff here. So who are us two? I'm Paul Sandy. I am a municipal city engineer. I work out of our Baxter office. I am Breezy Point's client representative, and I've been around town quite a while now. We were selected as the city's consultant for their large Bushman Road project. And so I've gotten to, over the last, what has it been, a year and a half now, I've gotten to really know this community and know the ins and outs and the intricacies of how the planning commission and the council and everyone kind of works together. I did grow up in Little Falls, Minnesota, so I'm a native of central Minnesota. I spent some time in Brainerd with David. I was city engineer there when David was the community development director. So we had many years of working relationship and going through a zoning code rewrite in Brainerd during our time there. So I feel like David and I have a very good previous working relationship, and we've just continued that in different capacities. So I'll pass it to Kim.
So I'm Kim Lindquist, and I'm the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development at WSB. So I've been with the WSB for 3 years, and before that worked in the public sector and had the opportunity to bring that knowledge to WSB and work with a variety of clients. I've primarily worked in the metro area. Most recently, I had worked for 17 years at the city of Rosemont, which is a fast-growing southeast suburb, as the community development director. So there, as well as the other cities I've worked in, Cottage Grove, Minnetonka, Mounds View, allowed me the opportunity to work with both short-term or current planning issues as well as long range. So both the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan work. I went through numerous comprehensive plan updates at the cities I worked in where we did them internally rather than hiring a consultant, which now I would never recommend anybody doing. And then also did a variety of ordinance updates as you know, as issues come up, you've really got to get the ordinance into shape as new things arise all the time, as you well know. And then similar to many communities that we're working in, after a while you do those little patch updates, and then at some point you've got to do the whole scale update and get it all aligned. So very familiar with all of those items. I'm going to just have you do it now that you have the touch. This is the team that we have. I put this in here because it's obviously not just Paul and I. We've got planners who are going to do research. They're going to look at other communities. We're going to look at, see what works for them, what could work for you. We've got, as Paul mentioned, we've got the graphics folks that are going to help enhance the ordinance as well as help with some of the comp plan amendments. We've got public engagement folks that are helping us with our engagement piece, and we've got GIS, so we've got your zoning map and those types of things, as well as anybody else in our organization. We need better information about wetlands, shoreland ordinance, grading situation, any of those things. We've got top-notch staff that we can call on to help us out. So we're going to go through just kind of why us, why WSB. So
Yeah, so you saw these four kind of touch points in our proposal. Number one being experience in growing communities. So as Kim kind of said, I've been at WSB for about 2 years now, and starting from day one, we worked very closely with the city of East Gull Lake. And since the time that we've started working in that community, we've really seen the massive amount of growth that they're seeing in a very similar community to Breezy Point. Kim is currently ongoing in the city's zoning code rewrite. At the same time, we're doing multiple large infrastructure projects. As David knows, and you know, you guys are got a lot of irons in the fire right now. You got, you know, the Bushman Road project. You have this. David, I believe, will be sending out a CIP planning RFP to really get, you know, all the city's goals aligned. And I think this opportunity for Breezy Point will really, between the capital improvement planning and the zoning ordinance rewrite, there's a lot of synergies that you can create between the two processes to help a growing community like Breezy Point really level the scale across all these different departments and all the development that's occurring in the city. So I think our experience in growing communities is pretty evident in Kim's experiences and mine. And I'll pass it to Kim for the plans that work.
Yep. So we're very well versed in getting you a plan that works for you. So there's certain things that you have to meet, state law, right? Gotta make sure it's meets the state requirements, that it's legally defensible. But then after that, it's individualized for each community. So you'll see in our proposal, the process is fairly similar regarding how you update a zoning ordinance. But what you write in the ordinance is unique to the community that we're working with. And that's based on input from staff, input from the commission, input from the community. And so we want to develop a plan that works for your city. What are the issues that are facing your community that you need the most assistance on? You need the better standards, you need to regulate, you know, the regulations. We want a plan that's actionable and realistic for you, both in terms of the zoning ordinance, and then, of course, we've got the comp plan modifications to align the two together. And so we want to make sure that those work for the community like now and then into the future so that you can have that all updated in a cohesive grouping.
Yeah, so number one and number three are kind of similar in nature. Knowing small outstate communities, I think, is really important. And our local presence in Baxter and working with a multitude of the outstate communities, I think, really helps support Kim's group and what she does down in the metro. And we, as client reps in the northern Minnesota market, really help her understand the needs of the community and make sure that the goals of the plan are aligned with what you guys all want. And so we really wanted to touch their, you know, the number one and three are similar, but yet they're different. And I think having the local presence in Baxter and having experience working in the city really sets us apart.
I would add too that even though I'm down in the metro, we work a lot with a lot of smaller communities. So often we do planning augmentation for communities that just don't have enough planning work to hire their own planner. And so I work, for example, in the city of Wyoming, in Lent Township, in Denmark Township. roughly similar populations to Breezy Point. And so while some of the metro-centric issues may be a little different, some of those issues are the same types though, just in smaller communities, because you're experiencing that combination of people moving there because of the small town character, but you're also receiving growth pressure, and how do you balance those two is something that would be both identified in those comp plan amendments, but also would be reflected in the ordinance and how that's developed. So I just wanted to briefly go through our public engagement. I've noted it a couple times in this presentation and also in the proposal, but we feel that it's really important to have a robust engagement associated with this effort. And I'll tell you, there's really two reasons. Often with a comprehensive plan, more than a zoning ordinance, you want to get the feedback from the community in terms of what they're looking for, what's the vision of the community, where do they see the community heading. But the other thing that I think is equally as important is the education that the residents can glean from these public engagement processes. Most people just do not understand a zoning ordinance. I mean, until they want to build or something, and then they need a variance or a conditional use permit, and they're like, what the heck? So they have no concept until it really hits home with them. And we want to bring some of that information to the residents through these community engagement activities so that they better understand what the zoning ordinance is and the comprehensive plan and what they can expect for their community in the future. And so it's really a win-win for the city, both in terms of getting people more involved and having them better understand the community and where they're going. So we've got proposed 2 community meetings. One would be towards the beginning, so you kind of get that flavor of what the community's looking for and where they think they're going. And then later, once we've got some draft, we want to make that presentation to them before it goes for final approval before the commission. Make sure that we've kind of vetted everything and people are reasonably comfortable with it, and then we'll make some fine tuning after that engagement. We also are going to do a pop-up event, so we don't expect everybody to set aside their Tuesday night and come in for our community meeting. We'll go to where people are. I don't know if it's a soccer game or a carnival or Breezy Point Days or the recycling event, whatever you pick, we'll go there and we'll talk to folks. And those are probably people that wouldn't typically go to a community meeting. So again, we're trying to get people in all walks of life for this project. The other thing we're going to do is a visual preference survey. So this is handy for 2 reasons, because one, it's electronic. So we're going to be using the city's website as kind of the project website, and then we'll put that preference survey on the website, as well as probably unveil it at the first community meeting. On the leave behind that we gave you on the back is an example of a community preference survey page that we did in Burnsville. So the example here is, if you look on the one photos, there had been some concern by some residents about this oversized garage. You can see the really high garage door. They were worried that it wasn't feeling suburban, and they were concerned if the neighborhood would like it. So we added a question and said, you know, which one do you like better, the traditional, which one or the other? But also, how do you feel about this? Would that be something that you would be okay with in your neighborhood? So we're not going to ask them, do they like a 10-foot setback or do they like a 35-foot high building? We're going to show them photos, and through that, we'll get an idea of what people are looking for in their neighborhoods. And so, for example, in this one, the residents were like, yeah, I don't care if it has an oversized garage. I don't care if they park an RV. So long as it looks like the rest of the building, it's fine by me. And so we made that modification in the ordinance. So that's the kind of thing, obviously, you have to extrapolate from the question, but that's kind of the point. And so we'll have, at the community meeting and potentially the pop-up, we'll have people with iPads taking the survey, getting people to take it, but then we'll put it on the website and hold that open for a while. So you don't have to be in person to be able to participate. And obviously, through the project website, we can also take any comment that people may want to provide. And then the final community engagement piece is, well, 2. 1, we'll be working with the steering committee, which maybe the planning commission, maybe the council and the planning commission. I'm not really sure exactly what was determined yet, but we'll probably see you folks again in that process. And then ultimately, we'll have an engagement summary of all the activities, and so you'll get that background information on all of that, as well as folding that information into the final product. So I talked a lot. We're almost done. Wanted to show you the map we put together in our proposal. I really love maps. I'm pretty sure that's why I wanted to be a planner, because I just love what you can do with them. So anyhow, this just shows the demographics, some of the background that we understand in Breezy Point. We'll be doing a deeper dive as part of the initial review and research so that we can better understand the character of the community. I want to point out the goals, though, that we understand from the RFP. What we're doing for the city is to provide a modern development, oh my gosh, I can't read. Modern development standards, why can I not read? Standards and processes, I'm sorry. So we want to modernize it, bring it up to date, make it clear and concise. And I think the clear and concise thing is interesting because it's not only for the residents that it's clear and concise with regular language, but it also will have those illustrations that further help the residents understand what the ordinance is really telling them and what they should be doing. But the clear and concise also helps the city because it's easier to administer. Often people feel that they're put upon or that there's kind of an inequity, and having a more clear and concise ordinance helps that everybody is treated fairly and equally in the implementation. We want to ensure that the ordinance, as well as a comp plan, ensures that unique small town feel and the character that you have in your community, but still considering new growth and development. And so we want to use the ordinance as a way to incentivize some development that's desired by the community by still making sure that the character of the community remains similar. And then, as I mentioned, we want it highly illustrative and easily accessible for the public. So those are the 7 tasks that are in the proposal. I'm not sure I need to read any of them to you, but if you have any questions, they're all there for you. So I'm pretty sure we talked enough. And then the schedule, we've got it basically on about a 17 to 18 month schedule. Often we just kind of have a little bit wider gap because some of it's related more to when meetings are scheduled. We can certainly try to double up on some meetings if that's appropriate, and we are comfortable working with the staff to try to come up with a schedule that works both for the steering committee, the joint meeting with the council and planning commission, so that we can try to hit all of those points as soon as possible within the regular schedule for the various meetings. That's it.
That's all we have.
Thank you.
That was a lot.
Gentlemen,
2 quick questions. The East Gull Lake one, are you done with that? And how long did that take, or?
So we started last fall. We aren't done.
Okay.
I'm almost, because I'm primarily working on the draft, and so we've got like 80% of it drafted, but
And that's
maybe
a
couple more months.
comp plan
That's
and?
just a full update on their zoning ordinance.
Oh, okay, okay. And then you said you're gonna have 2 public meetings?
Yep.
How do you get people to come to these meetings?
Well, we can send postcards, we can put stuff in the utility bill, we put it on the city's website, we can post it on, at other events. So it is a little bit that they'll have to take that initiative, which is why we put in the pop-up, so that we can go to
Yeah.
where they are too.
It's tough to get people.
and that's wherever you go again.
Yeah, that's
Again,
true.
Zoning is one of those things that I think
Yeah.
has been mentioned before. Not everyone is
Unless they're
crazy about it,
involved.
like some of us in this room are.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, we'll work with whatever the consultant is selected to do that kind of thing. Use our social media, use our website. Just put an assistant administrator Ike to work on doing his thing, and get as much of a turnout as we can. So.
But that's why too, I think the website helps, because if people can't make it or don't want to make that, they have the opportunity to go on the site and they, you know, we've been posting, you know, like the packets for the steering committee, so people can follow along should they choose to, or make comment should they choose to, at the privacy of their own home.
Yeah, some people just don't like coming to public forum type events and discussing, you know, with public officials, and they'd rather, you know, sit on a website and do their own research and figure it out on their own. So, as many touch points as we can get, I think is kind of the goal.
Okay.
I was just looking for a budget.
Oh, the budget's
It's in their,
in the last
in their
page.
proposal.
On the last page?
And it's, I think it's 107,497.
Okay.
And we'd be happy also to discuss that, because if we have ability to double up on, you know, like at the steering committee and the community meeting on the same day, you want to do more virtual, some of those kinds of things, we can do some cost savings. We're pretty flexible. Once we get in the door, we'd be happy to work with the city to help save money and resources.
I mean, I think from a budget appropriateness, I think, you know, from a zoning code rewrite perspective, I think it's right where you would consider that.
So I've got two questions I've pretty much asked everybody. So obviously, Paul, we know you're just down the street. Within, how often do you think, Kim, we will see you and your team?
Well, it'll primarily be me. I would say we've got them listed. We'll be here for the community meetings and the pop-up, so all of that is in person. We'll do the kickoff in person, the joint meeting, and then there's a few of the steering committee will be virtual. We'll probably send Paul anyhow.
Okay, excellent. And then the second one is just been asking everybody as we gear up for, you know, regulations regarding cannabis to get going here shortly. Have you been working with any of the other cities on that and what you're foreseeing on, you know, obviously there's a zoning piece to that, and obviously since we're going to be updating the zoning code at this time, obviously this is going to take a role. So kind of seeing what you're seeing and if you've been working with any other your cities on that.
Really, it's been all over the board. We've got a couple cities that our clients who want to like sell it from the city municipal. But in the most part, a lot of our cities are just doing a moratorium right now, waiting for those state rules. And so hopefully we can get that rule in play and then introduce that into your ordinance in a timely manner. I think a lot of the cities are looking at it very similar to like adult uses. You know, you've got to have it somewhere, but let's really button up where it's going to be.
Pete?
Question on the, this does combine both the comprehensive plan and the zoning code update. Realistically, at the time frame that we proposed for the project, how reasonable is that in your mind to accomplish this project in its entirety?
I think that's a fine timeline, because really, even though the whole draft of the ordinance may not be crafted, we'll know where we're going, and we looked at the comp plan at the beginning, so we can track where the areas are that need some updating. I mean, my understanding is it's an alignment issue, and so we'll be looking at, you know, kind of tracking those and make those modifications. I do have in the schedule that the comp plan does lag a bit, but that's another option, is we can just kind of hold the ordinance and bring them together if that's a desire. But I think it's doable. I'm going to be honest with you. Often my experience is by the time we try to schedule some of these meetings, it just kind of stretches. You know, people are like, well, we can't have it by Thanksgiving, we can't have it by the 4th. You know, and so you start pushing out some of those community meetings, and then
It's more often on the city's end than obviously than.
yeah, we've definitely got the staff and the capacity to do this work, or we wouldn't have proposed.
Sure. And as far as like a zoning code with a comprehensive plan, your preference in tackling zoning code first, then moving the...
Well, I think because you want to include the comp plan, we're going to be reviewing the comp plan in the beginning, and I think we do need to track those issues up front. I mean, the zoning, some of that just we need to update, and it's some of that'll just happen regardless with the comp plan. But I do think those, like those neighborhood character issues and some of those things that we talked about, the unique issues, I think that's the part where we're gonna track with the comp plan and kind of see how that rolls out in the ordinance and then make those modifications. But yes, I agree that the comp plan, we need to make sure we're confident with where we're heading with that at the very beginning.
Okay.
And that does reflect the ordinance changes.
All right.
Anyone else have any other questions? I want to thank you two for taking the time, and for Kim for coming up. Obviously, the Planning Commission, meeting again to deliberate, to discuss, and then the intention is for then a recommendation go to the City Council for a final decision on June 3rd.
Okay.
And then hopefully we'll,
Well, thanks for showing up.
yeah. So again, thank you, and we appreciate it, and you'll be hearing from us.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good meeting
you.
you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Paul.
Roger and Teddy, I think at this point, we never, I intentionally didn't, so we don't have any applications for next week, but we
Oh.
intentionally did not cancel the meeting because we didn't know what you guys all wanted to do tonight. And obviously, since we didn't have a quorum, we're gonna need to meet. So we'll meet next Thursday, we'll put a packet together, by today or
Tuesday.
thank you, Tuesday. We'll put a packet together either today or tomorrow, get it out there, and pretty much the lone item will be to have this discussion. We'll get the videos uploaded tomorrow so that people can review them again, review the presentations. Also, we'll send out the slideshows too, so you have the slideshows in addition to the proposals as well. And then we'll discuss next week, and so we can try to get something lined up to send to the council.
So the fourth one is a no-show?
Yeah, you want to make sure they didn't just show up. I didn't hear the doorbell.
Back door.
Yeah, I didn't hear the doorbell, but yeah, I don't know. They sent us their presentation today, so. Yeah, I had it lined up, and then we went back there and they weren't here. Landform, they're out of the cities. What? No. No, the consultant who did Brainerd, they did not have the capacity at this time, so she did not submit a proposal. I was gonna say, you're gonna have to get going here soon, Roger, anyway, right?